The woman who saved a stranger's child in the middle of a winter storm had no idea her entire life was about to change. Within 24 hours, the most dangerous man in Seoul would arrive at her door with a proposal that sounded completely impossible. But maybe the craziest part was that she'd actually consider saying yes. So, if you want to see how one act of kindness turned into the most unexpected love story ever, get your headset, find a popcorn, and relax yourself, because this is about to get even more interesting. Subscribe now and join me as we start. Cora pulled her threadbare coat tighter as snow whipped across the narrow street, the wind biting through every worn patch in the fabric. The small Ethiopian restaurant where she worked had closed early tonight because nobody wanted to venture out in this weather, which meant she'd lost half a day's wages. But she couldn't think about that right now. She just needed to get back to her tiny apartment on the other side of Itaewon before the storm got worse. The streets were nearly empty, most people smart enough to stay indoors. She kept her head down, boots crunching through fresh snow that was already ankle-deep and getting deeper by the minute. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves about 10 minutes ago. That's when she heard it, a small, frightened sound cutting through the howl of the wind. Cora stopped listening. There it was again, coming from the narrow alley between two buildings. She probably should have kept walking, should have minded her own business like everyone always said to do in this city, but something in that sound made her feet change direction. The boy couldn't have been more than 5 years old, huddled against a dumpster in clothes that were completely wrong for this weather. No coat, no hat, just a thin sweater and pants that were already soaked through from the snow. His lips had a bluish tint that made Cora's stomach drop. Hey, little one," she said softly, kneeling down despite the cold snow soaking through her pants. She switched to Korean, her accent still thick after 3 years in Seoul. "Where's your family?" The boy just stared at her with huge, terrified eyes and clattering teeth. Cora looked around the alley, searching for any sign of parents or guardians, but there was nothing except garbage bins and the howling wind. She couldn't just leave him here, that much was obvious. He'd freeze to death before morning. Okay, it's going to be all right," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She shrugged off her coat, wrapping it around his small body, even though it left her in just her work uniform. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The boy didn't resist when she picked him up, which worried her even more. He should have been scared of strangers, should have pulled away or cried out, but instead, he just tucked his face against her shoulder and shivered violently. Her apartment was another 15 minutes away, but there was an old cottage she'd passed 100 times just 2 blocks from here. It had been abandoned for years, windows boarded up and door hanging crooked on its hinges, but it would be better than nothing. Better than this alley. Cora half ran, half stumbled through the deepening snow, the boy's weight making her arms ache. She could barely feel her face anymore, couldn't tell if the wetness on her cheeks was melting snow or tears from the brutal wind. The cottage door gave way easily when she shouldered it open, hinges screaming in protest. Inside was dark and musty, but at least the wind wasn't cutting through her anymore. She fumbled for her phone, using its dim light to navigate around scattered debris and furniture covered in dusty sheets. There was an old fireplace in what might have once been a living room. Cora set the boy down gently on a sheet-covered sofa, keeping her coat wrapped tight around him. Her hands were shaking as she gathered bits of broken furniture and old newspapers, arranging them in the fireplace. The matches in her pocket were damp, and it took 6 tries before one finally caught. The fire started small, just a hesitant flicker, but gradually it grew stronger. Warmth began to creep into the small space. "What's your name?" Cora asked, rubbing the boy's hands between hers to get his circulation going. "Can you tell me your name?" He whispered something so quietly she almost missed it. "Dae-young." "Dae-young," she repeated, offering him a small smile. "That's a good name. I'm Cora. You're safe now, I promise." The boy's eyes were starting to clear a bit, some of the awful bluish tint fading from his lips. He looked around the cottage with confusion but didn't seem scared anymore, which Cora took as a good sign. She checked her phone, hoping for a signal strong enough to call the police, but there was nothing. The storm must have knocked out the cell towers. They'd have to wait it out here until morning, then she'd take Dae-young to the authorities and they'd find his family. "Are you hungry?" she asked, digging through her bag. She'd packed a small container of injera and leftover stew from the restaurant, her dinner for tonight. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Dae-young nodded slowly. They shared the food in silence, the fire crackling and popping as it consumed the old wood. Cora tried not to think about how her landlord would react if she couldn't make rent this month, tried not to worry about the fact that she'd probably catch a horrible cold from being soaked to the bone in this freezing weather. None of that mattered right now. What mattered was the small boy sitting next to her, his color gradually returning as warmth filled the cottage. What mattered was that he was alive. "Where's your family, Dae-young?" she asked gently after he'd finished eating. "Do you know how you got lost?" His small face crumpled. "The bad men, they took me from school. They said they'd hurt Amma and Appa if I screamed." Cora's blood ran cold. Kidnapped. This child had been kidnapped, and she'd just stumbled into the middle of it. "But I ran," Dae-young continued, his voice getting smaller. "When they weren't looking, I ran, but then I got lost, and it was so cold." Hey, you were so brave," Cora said quickly, pulling him close. "So brave, Dae-young. Your parents are probably looking everywhere for you right now. As soon as this storm stops, we'll find them, okay? I promise." He nodded against her shoulder, and she felt his breathing start to even out. Poor kid was exhausted. Cora kept the fire going through the night, feeding it carefully with whatever burnable material she could find in the cottage. She didn't sleep, too worried about the fire dying out or Dae-young's condition worsening. Instead, she watched the snow continue to fall outside the broken windows, each flake adding to the white blanket covering the city. By morning, the storm had finally passed. Weak sunlight filtered through the gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Dae-young was still asleep, curled up on the sofa under Cora's coat and a dusty blanket she'd found in a closet. Cora's phone finally had a signal again. She was about to dial the police when she heard voices outside, getting closer. "The tracking device shows he was in this area," a man's voice said in Korean, crisp and professional. "Search every building." Cora's heart jumped. Maybe it was Dae-young's family, maybe rescue had found them first. She moved toward the door just as it burst open, and suddenly the small cottage was filled with men in dark suits. But the man who entered last made everyone else seem to disappear. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with sharp features and eyes that swept the room like he was cataloging every detail in an instant. His suit was perfectly tailored, not a single snowflake daring to mar its surface, and there was something about the way he carried himself that made Cora's instincts scream danger, even though he hadn't done anything threatening. Those calculating eyes landed on the sofa where Dae-young was starting to stir, then shifted to Cora. For a moment, nobody moved. "Appa," Dae-young said sleepily, rubbing his eyes. Then louder, with dawning excitement, "APPA." The man's expression cracked, just for a second, something like relief and fury and fear all mixed together flashing across his face before the mask slammed back down. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside the sofa to gather Dae-young into his arms. "You're safe," he murmured in Korean, his voice rough. "You're safe, Adol." Cora watched the reunion, her tired brain struggling to process what was happening. Father and son, obviously, but something about the situation felt wrong. The men in suits, the way they'd burst in here, the tension radiating from every person except Dae-young. "Thank you," the man said, and it took Cora a moment to realize he was speaking to her now. His Korean was perfect, but there was something in his tone that suggested he could probably speak a dozen languages if he wanted to. "You saved my son's life." Anyone would have done the same thing," Cora stammered, suddenly very aware of how she must look with her hair sticking up everywhere and her uniform wrinkled and stained. "No," he said flatly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have walked past him in that alley." His eyes studied her face intently. "What's your name?"
Cora.
"Cora Abebe." "Cora," he repeated, like he was memorizing it. "I am Kong Jibium, and I owe you a debt that cannot be easily repaid." Something about the way he said that made Cora nervous. "You don't owe me anything, really. I'm just glad Dae-young is okay." Kong Jibium stood, still holding his son, and gestured to one of the men in suits. "Get Ms. Abebe's address. Make sure she has everything she needs, new apartment, compensation for her troubles, whatever she wants." "Wait, no. That's not necessary." Cora protested, but GIBM was already turning away, heading for the door with Dae-young clinging to his neck. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her one more time. "I always repay my debts, Ms. Abebe. Always." Then he was gone, leaving Cora standing in the dusty cottage with a dozen questions and no answers. 23 hours had passed since Cora watched Kong GIBM disappear into a sleek black car with his son, and she'd almost convinced herself the whole thing had been some kind of fever dream brought on by hypothermia. Almost. Then someone knocked on her apartment door at exactly 8 in the evening, and everything got weird again. The woman standing in the hallway wore a professional smile and carried a leather folder that probably cost more than Cora's entire wardrobe. "Ms. Abebe? I'm from Mr. Kang's office. May I come in?" Cora should have said no, should have closed the door and pretended she wasn't home, but curiosity won out. "Sure, I guess." The woman's smile never wavered as she stepped inside, though Cora saw her eyes flick over the cramped studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and ancient radiator that clanked but barely produced heat. "Mr. Kong wishes to thank you properly for saving his son. He's arranged for you to move to a better apartment, no rent for the first year, and a position at one of his restaurants where the pay is significantly better than your current employment." That's too much," Cora said, shaking her head. "I can't accept all that," Mr. Kong insisted. The woman opened her folder, pulling out documents. "He also wanted me to give you this." It was a bank statement showing a deposit that made Cora's knees go weak. More money than she'd make in 2 years, just sitting there with her name on it. "This is crazy," Cora whispered. "Who does this? Who just gives someone they met once this much money?" The woman's professional smile finally showed some cracks. "Someone who understands the true value of his son's life," she said quietly. "And someone who, well, Mr. Kong isn't accustomed to people helping him without expecting something in return. You didn't ask for anything, didn't even give your contact information. That interested him." Interested him how? Before the woman could answer, a phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted into something like surprise. "Mr. Kong would like to meet with you. Tonight. To properly thank you himself. I really don't think. He's waiting downstairs." Cora moved to the window, pulling back the threadbare curtain. Sure enough, that same sleek black car was parked on the street below, looking incredibly out of place among the dented economy vehicles and delivery scooters. She should have said no. Should have told the woman that she appreciated the offer, but couldn't accept, that she wanted nothing to do with whatever world Kong GIBM inhabited. But there was something about last night, about the way his mask had cracked when he saw his son safe, that made her curious despite her better judgment. "Give me 5 minutes to change," Cora heard herself say. The car's interior was warm and quiet, expensive in a way Cora couldn't quite define but could definitely feel. GIBM sat across from her, looking somehow even more intimidating than he had in the cottage. Tonight, he wore a dark sweater instead of a suit, but it didn't make him seem any more approachable. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, his voice formal. "I wanted to apologize for leaving so abruptly yesterday. The circumstances were complicated." "Is Dae-young okay?" Cora asked because that was the only thing that really mattered. Something in GIBM's expression softened. "He's fine. Asking about you, actually. Keeps calling you the snow angel who saved him." That made Cora smile despite her nervousness. "He's a sweet kid." "He is." GIBM leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Abebe, Cora, I need to be honest with you about something. My son was taken by people who wanted to hurt me through him. Those same people are still out there, and they will likely try again." Cora's smile faded. "You should tell the police." "The police can't help with this." His eyes held hers steadily. "I exist in a world where normal rules don't always apply. A world where people like me have to take care of problems ourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying?" She did, and her stomach twisted. "You're in some kind of gang." "I prefer to think of it as a family business," GIBM said dryly. "But yes, essentially. And because you saved Dae-young, because you got involved even accidentally, you're now on their radar too. They'll want to know who you are, why you helped him." "That's not my problem," Cora said, fighting to keep her voice steady even though fear was creeping up her spine. "I just helped a kid who needed help. That's it." "I know. And that's exactly why I'm here." GIBM pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the seat to her. This was taken this morning, outside the restaurant where you work. The photo showed a man in a baseball cap, apparently just a regular customer passing by. But there was something about the way he was angled, the way his attention seemed focused on the restaurant staff entrance. He's been watching you, GIBM continued quietly. My people have been watching him watch you. Eventually, he's going to make a move, probably to grab you and use you as leverage against me. And I can't. He stopped, jaw tightening. I can't let that happen. Not after what you did for my son. Cora stared at the photograph, her mind racing. So, what are you saying? That I need to go into hiding or something? I'm saying I want to offer you protection. Proper protection, the kind that will actually keep you safe. GIBM hesitated, and for the first time, he looked almost uncertain. There's a traditional way to do this in my world, a way that would send a clear message that you're under my protection and not to be touched. What way? Marriage. The word hung in the air between them, so ridiculous that Cora almost laughed. Would have laughed if GIBM's expression hadn't been completely serious. You want to marry me, she said slowly. To protect me from your enemies. Because I sheltered your kid during a snowstorm. I know how it sounds, GIBM admitted, but in my world, family is sacred. A wife is untouchable, protected by every member of the organization. If you were my wife, even in name only, nobody would dare harm you. You'd be completely safe. This is insane, Cora whispered. You can't just marry a stranger. People do it all the time. Arranged marriages, marriages of convenience. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more. You'd have your own space, your own life. I wouldn't expect anything intimate. Just the appearance of marriage, the legal protection it provides. Cora's head was spinning, the whole conversation feeling completely unreal. And if I say no? Then I'll still provide protection, but it won't be as effective. There will be gaps, vulnerabilities. GIBM's voice was matter-of-fact, like they were discussing insurance policies instead of her entire life. The people who took Daeyoung don't play by rules. They'll exploit any weakness they can find. Let me get this straight, Cora said, trying to organize her thoughts. You're asking me to marry you, pretend to be your wife, just so these people will leave me alone? And you'd want nothing from me except... What? Exactly? Your presence at certain events where appearances matter. Your cooperation in maintaining the illusion. He paused, something flickering in his eyes. And maybe, if you're willing, Daeyoung would like to see you again. He hasn't stopped talking about you since yesterday. That last part hit differently, and GIBM probably knew it. Cora thought about the small boy shivering in that alley, the trust in his eyes when she'd wrapped him in her coat. She thought about him calling her his snow angel. I need time to think about this, she said finally. It's too much, too fast. You have 24 hours, GIBM replied, handing her a business card with a single phone number on it. After that, my enemies will likely make their move and the option for clean protection disappears. I'm sorry to pressure you, but that's the reality of the situation. The car stopped in front of her building. Cora clutched the business card, her mind still reeling. One more thing, GIBM said as she reached for the door handle. I know this seems like I'm getting everything out of this arrangement and you're getting nothing but trouble. But I want you to know what you did for my son, sheltering him when you had every reason to keep walking, when it cost you comfort and safety. That means something to me. It means everything, actually. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This man who seemed so controlled and calculating suddenly sounded almost vulnerable, and it made him seem human in a way she hadn't expected. I'll think about it, Cora repeated, and then she was out of the car, hurrying into her building without looking back. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling while her mind went in circles. The smart thing would be to refuse, to take whatever standard protection GIBM offered, and hope for the best. Getting tangled up in his world any more than she already was seemed like asking for disaster. But then she'd remember that photograph, the man watching her workplace, and fear would spike through her chest. She'd come to Seoul 3 years ago to escape problems in Addis Ababa, to start fresh somewhere nobody knew her past. The idea of being hunted again, of looking over her shoulder constantly, And there was Dae-young. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about how maybe if she did this crazy thing, she'd get to see him smile again, make sure he was really okay. By morning, she'd made her decision. Probably a stupid one, but hers nonetheless. She called the number on the business card at exactly 8 o'clock. GIBM answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting by the phone. "I'll do it," Cora said before she could change her mind. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I want my own space like you said. Not some room in your house, my own apartment, my own key, my own life when we're not doing the appearance thing." She was pacing her tiny studio, words coming faster now. "Second, I keep working. Maybe not at the restaurant if that's a security risk, but I need to do something, earn my own money. I won't be some kept woman sitting around waiting for you to tell me what to do." Agreed to both, GIBM said without hesitation. "Anything else?"
"Yeah.
"If at any point this arrangement puts me in actual danger instead of protecting me, I'm out. No arguments, no guilt trips. I walk away, and you leave me alone. Deal?" There was a pause on the other end of the line.
Deal."
"Can you be ready in an hour? We should move quickly before anyone realizes what we're planning." "An hour? For what?" "To get married," GIBM said, like it was obvious. "Unless you wanted a big ceremony?" Cora laughed, slightly hysterical. "No, definitely not. An hour is fine. This whole thing is already surreal enough." The ceremony happened in a private office with a government official who asked no questions and processed the paperwork with impressive speed. Cora wore the nicest dress she owned, a simple blue thing she'd bought at a market stall, while GIBM showed up in another perfect suit. There were no flowers, no music, no guests except for two of GIBM's people who served as witnesses. The official droned through the legal requirements in Korean, and Cora found herself saying, "I do," to a man whose favorite color she didn't know, whose birthday was a mystery, who she'd met exactly twice before this moment. When it was over, GIBM slipped a ring onto her finger, simple gold band, perfectly sized. He must have had someone check while she was sleeping, which should have creeped her out but somehow just seemed efficient. "Well," Cora said as they left the building, now legally husband and wife. That was possibly the least romantic wedding in history. "Probably," GIBM agreed, and she thought maybe she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Almost a smile. "Your new apartment is ready. I'll take you there now, if you'd like to see it." The apartment was in Hanamdong, in a building so fancy Cora felt out of place just walking through the lobby. Her new home was on the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of the Han River and the city beyond. "This is too much," Cora said, walking through rooms that seemed to go on forever. There was a kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use, a bathroom with a soaking tub, a bedroom with the biggest bed she'd ever seen. "It's secure," GIBM said, pointing to discreet cameras in the corners. 24-hour doorman, restricted elevator access, reinforced locks. Nobody gets in without clearance. He handed her a phone, newer and fancier than anything she'd ever owned. "My number is programmed in. If you need anything, anytime, you call." "Understood?" "Understood." Cora turned the phone over in her hands. "So what happens now? Do we just pretend to be married and hope your enemies believe it?" "We make them believe it," GIBM corrected. "Which means being seen together, acting like a couple in public. There's a charity dinner tomorrow night, very high profile. We'll attend together, let people see the ring, start spreading the word." He checked his watch. "For today, get settled in. Buy whatever you need. The black card in the kitchen drawer has no limit. Someone will bring your things from your old apartment this afternoon." "Wait, you're leaving?" Cora hadn't expected to feel disappointed by that, but somehow she did. Everything was moving so fast, and GIBM was the only anchor point she had in this new reality. "I have work to handle," he said, already heading for the door. Then he paused, looking back at her. "But Dae-young would like to see you if you're willing. Maybe tomorrow afternoon, before the dinner?" "Yeah," Cora said, smiling despite everything. "I'd really like that." After GIBM left, Cora wandered through the apartment in a daze, touching expensive furniture and staring out windows at a city that suddenly felt completely foreign. 24 hours ago, she'd been struggling to pay rent on a studio with a broken heater. Now she was married to a man she barely knew, living in luxury, supposedly protected from dangers she didn't fully understand. She found the black card in the kitchen drawer, along with a note in neat handwriting. Buy something nice for tomorrow. You deserve it. T.S. The formality of the note matched everything else about him, but there was something almost sweet in the sentiment. Maybe this wouldn't be completely terrible. Maybe they could actually make this arrangement work. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Dae-young's number. He made me promise to tell you he drew you a picture. He wants to give it to you tomorrow. Cora found herself grinning at her phone like an idiot. Yeah, maybe this could work. The next afternoon, a car picked her up and drove her to an address in Gangnam. The house, no, mansion was surrounded by high walls and security gates. Cora's nervousness came rushing back as the gates swung open and they pulled up the long driveway. Dae-young was waiting at the front door, practically vibrating with excitement. The moment Cora got out of the car, he launched himself at her, wrapping small arms around her waist. You came. Appa said you would come, but I wasn't sure, and I drew you 5 pictures because I couldn't decide which one was best, so I just drew a lot of them and... Breathe, Cora said, laughing as she hugged him back. It's good to see you too, Dae-young. GIBM appeared in the doorway, and something in his expression softened when he saw them together. Come inside. Dae-young has been preparing for your visit all morning. The inside of the house was elegant but surprisingly warm, not the cold museum she'd expected. Dae-young dragged her to the living room where he'd spread out his drawings on the coffee table, each one showing a woman with dark skin and curly hair standing next to a small boy in the snow. This one is my favorite, Dae-young said, pointing to a picture where the woman had an actual halo drawn around her head. Because you're my angel, so you need angel wings, but I'm not good at drawing wings yet, so I just did the halo part. They're all beautiful, Cora said honestly, crouching down to examine each drawing. Can I keep this one? Dae-young's face lit up. Really? You want to keep it? Of course I do. I'll put it up in my new apartment, so I can see it every day. She glanced up to find GIBM watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not quite a smile, but something close to it, something that made him look younger and less intimidating. They had tea together, the 3 of them, and Dae-young chattered away about school and his friends and the new video game he was terrible at but loved anyway. GIBM mostly listened, occasionally interjecting with a comment or gentle correction when Dae-young's story got too elaborate. Miss Cora, Dae-young said suddenly, his expression turning serious. Are you going to be my new Amma? The question hung in the air. Cora looked at GIBM, searching for guidance, but he seemed just as caught off guard as she was. Well, Cora said carefully, you're Appa and I got married, so technically yes, but that doesn't mean you have to call me Amma if you don't want to. You can just call me Cora or Nuna or whatever feels right to you. Dae-young considered this very seriously. I think maybe Cora Amma? Is that okay? Something in Cora's chest tightened. This kid barely knew her, had no reason to trust her or accept her, but here he was trying to find a way to make her part of his family. That's very okay, she managed to say. Good. Dae-young nodded decisively, then went back to his tea like the matter was completely settled. Later, after Dae-young had been called away by his tutor, GIBM walked Cora to the car that would take her back to her apartment to prepare for the evening. Thank you, he said quietly, for being kind to him, for not making this more complicated than it has to be. He's a good kid, Cora replied. Easy to be kind to. His mother died when he was 2, GIBM said abruptly, like the words had been building up and needed to escape. Illness, nothing dramatic or violent, just one day she was here, and then she wasn't. He doesn't remember her, which somehow makes it worse. Cora didn't know what to say to that, so she just reached out and squeezed his arm briefly, a gesture of comfort. GIBM looked down at her hand like he wasn't used to being touched gently, which was probably true. I'll send a car at 7 for the dinner, he said, stepping back. Wear the ring where people can see it. Got it. Cora climbed into the car, but before the door closed she added, GIBM? Thank you for letting me see him today. That was really nice. He nodded once, already turning away, but she thought maybe she'd seen that almost smile again. The dress Cora bought for the charity dinner was simple but elegant, deep burgundy that complemented her dark skin and didn't make her feel like she was playing dress-up. She'd never been to anything fancy like this before, and her hands were shaking slightly as she tried to manage the clasp on the necklace she'd also purchased. The knock on her door came at exactly 7 o'clock. But instead of a driver, GIBM himself stood in the hallway, looking unfairly good in a black suit with a subtle pattern. "You look nice," he said, his eyes traveling over her dress with what might have been approval. "Thanks, you too." Cora gestured helplessly at her neck. "I can't get this stupid clasp too. May I?" She turned around, pulling her hair aside, and tried not to flinch when his fingers brushed against her neck. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he worked the clasp, breath warm against her skin. "There," he said, stepping back quickly. "Ready." The charity dinner was being held at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels, the kind of place Cora had only ever seen in dramas. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and well-dressed people who all seemed to know each other, their laughter and conversation creating a constant buzz of sound. GIBM kept his hand on the small of her back as they navigated through the crowd, a possessive gesture that was probably for show but made Cora's skin tingle anyway. People stared at them, whispers following in their wake. "They're looking at us," Cora murmured. "They're looking at you," GIBM corrected. "Wondering who you are, where you came from, why I married someone they've never heard of." His hand pressed slightly more firmly against her back. Let them wonder. They were stopped every few feet by people wanting to congratulate GIBM on his marriage, their curiosity barely concealed behind polite smiles. He introduced Cora the same way each time, his tone formal but somehow conveying that she was off-limits for interrogation. "Mr. Kong, what a surprise to hear about your marriage," an older woman said, her smile sharp. "How did you two meet?" "She saved my son's life," GIBM replied smoothly. Everything else seemed rather insignificant after that. The woman's expression shifted from curiosity to something more assessing. "How romantic. And where are you from, my dear?" "Ethiopia," Cora said, lifting her chin slightly. She'd dealt with this kind of thinly veiled prejudice before, knew exactly what the woman was really asking. "How exotic," the woman murmured, and Cora had to bite her tongue to keep from saying something rude. GIBM must have sensed her irritation because his hand moved from her back to her hand, fingers lacing through hers. "If you'll excuse us, I'd like to show my wife the terrace." He led her away before the woman could respond, weaving through the crowd until they emerged onto a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cold but refreshing after the stuffy ballroom. "Sorry about that," GIBM said, releasing her hand. "Some of these people are difficult." "Racist, you mean?" Cora said bluntly. "It's okay, I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be." He leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. "For what it's worth, anyone who has a problem with you has a problem with me. That will become clear soon enough." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the party noise muffled behind the glass doors. "Can I ask you something?" Cora said eventually. "What exactly do you do? Like, I know you said family business, but what does that actually mean?" GIBM was quiet for a long moment. "Mostly legitimate enterprises now. Real estate, restaurants, import-export. But my family's reputation, that comes from less legitimate activities in the past. Protection services, information brokering, settling disputes that can't go through legal channels." "So like a fixer?" "Something like that." He glanced at her. "Does that bother you?" "I mean, yeah, kind of. But I already agreed to this arrangement knowing you weren't exactly a regular businessman, so I guess I can't complain now." That got an actual smile from him, small but genuine. "You're refreshingly honest. Life's too short to pretend everything's fine when it isn't." Cora shivered as the wind picked up, rubbing her bare arms. Without a word, GIBM shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so classically romantic that Cora almost laughed, except he was looking at her with those intense eyes and suddenly laughter seemed impossible. "We should go back inside," he said. "People will talk if we're out here too long." "Let them talk," Cora replied, but she followed him back into the warmth anyway, his jacket still around her shoulders. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. GIBM stayed close to her side, his hand finding hers again whenever the crowd got particularly thick. It was all for show, Cora reminded herself. All part of the performance they'd agreed to. But when he looked at her while some boring businessman droned on about market trends, when he rolled his eyes just slightly in a way only she could see, it felt less like performing and more like they were in on a secret together. The car ride home was quiet, both of them tired from maintaining pleasant expressions for hours. GIBM walked her to her apartment door despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "I know this whole situation is strange, but you handled it well." "Thanks, I think." Cora pulled off his jacket, holding it out to him. "Here, you'll freeze without this." "Keep it," GIBM said. "You'll probably need it for the next event." He hesitated, then added, "Dae-young wants to know if you'll have breakfast with us tomorrow." No pressure, but he's already planning what to make you. Cora found herself smiling. "Tell him I'll be there." "What time?" 9 o'clock. "I'll send a car." After he left, Cora got ready for bed in a daze, GIBM's jacket still draped over her chair. She kept catching herself looking at it, remembering the weight of it on her shoulders, the faint scent of his cologne clinging to the fabric. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, she reminded herself firmly. Protection in exchange for appearances, nothing more. Getting emotionally involved would be stupid. But then she thought about the way he'd smiled on the terrace, the careful way he'd fastened her necklace, the protective hand on her back all evening, and she wondered if maybe she was already in trouble. Breakfast at GIBM's house became a regular thing over the next few weeks. Dae-young would excitedly show her whatever new drawing or school project he was working on, chattering away while GIBM drank coffee and occasionally interjected with comments. It felt almost normal, like they were actually a family instead of just playing pretend. One morning about a month into their arrangement, Cora arrived to find Dae-young bouncing with barely contained excitement. "We're going to the park today," he announced before she'd even gotten her coat off. "Appa said yes, and you're coming too, and we can feed the ducks and maybe get ice cream even though it's still cold and—" "Slow down," GIBM said, appearing from the kitchen with that almost smile that Cora had learned meant he was genuinely amused. "She just got here. Is this okay?" Cora asked, looking at him. "I don't want to intrude on your day." "You're not intruding. Besides, Dae-young has been planning this since yesterday. I'd never hear the end of it if you didn't come." The park was surprisingly empty for Saturday, probably because of the lingering cold. Dae-young ran ahead to the duck pond, clutching a bag of seeds GIBM had brought. Two of GIBM's security people followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough away to give the illusion of privacy. "Does he know?" Cora asked quietly as they walked. "About why we really got married?" "He knows our marriage happened quickly, because I wanted to keep him safe. He doesn't know the specifics about the kidnapping attempt or the people who want to hurt us." GIBM's jaw tightened. "He thinks we fell in love after you saved him." It seemed kinder than the truth. "Maybe it's not entirely a lie," Cora said, then immediately regretted it when GIBM looked at her sharply. "I just mean we care about him. That part's real, right?" "Right." GIBM agreed after a moment. "That part's very real." They spent the afternoon watching Dae-young feed ducks and climb on playground equipment, GIBM staying close enough to catch him if he fell, but letting him explore independently. It struck Cora how normal he seemed like this, how the dangerous businessman disappeared when he was just a father watching his son play. "Ice cream time," Dae-young announced, racing back to them with flushed cheeks and windswept hair. "It's 30 degrees out," GIBM protested half-heartedly. "You promised." They ended up at a small shop near the park, Dae-young ordering the most elaborate sundae on the menu while Cora and GIBM shared a more reasonable portion. Well, Cora ate most of it while GIBM pretended to be interested in his phone but kept stealing glances at her. "You have ice cream on your nose," he said suddenly. Cora grabbed a napkin, but GIBM reached out before she could use it, his thumb brushing across her nose to remove the smudge. The gesture was quick, almost absent-minded, but it made her freeze. "Got it," he said, withdrawing his hand like he'd just realized what he'd done. "Thanks," Cora managed, her face warm despite the cold ice cream. Dae-young was watching them with a knowing look that seemed way too old for a 5-year-old. "Appa likes you," he announced matter-of-factly. "He smiles more when you're here." "Dae-young," GIBM said, his ears turning slightly red. "Finish your ice cream." But Cora was smiling now, storing that information away like a treasure. He smiled more when she was around. That had to mean something, right? The next week brought their first real test as a couple. GIBM's business partner was getting married, and they were expected to attend together, stay the whole evening, act completely natural as husband and wife in front of people who knew him well. Just follow my lead, GIBM said as they arrived at the venue. These people are more perceptive than the charity dinner crowd. They'll be watching for cracks. No pressure or anything, Cora muttered, but she straightened her shoulders and plastered on a smile. The wedding was beautiful in a lavish, over-the-top way. Cora found herself seated at a table with several of GIBM's business associates and their wives, all of whom seemed intensely curious about her. So, how long have you two been together? One woman asked, leaning forward with barely concealed interest. Not long, Cora said, sticking to the vague story they'd agreed on. But sometimes you just know, you know? And you're from Ethiopia? How fascinating. What brought you to Korea? GIBM's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Cora squeezed back, drawing strength from the contact. Work initially, but I fell in love with Seoul. The energy, the culture, the food. She smiled at GIBM. And eventually the people. The woman looked disappointed by the non-scandalous answer, but before she could press further, the ceremony began. Watching the bride and groom exchange vows, Cora felt a strange tightness in her chest. This was what marriage was supposed to look like. Two people who actually loved each other, promising forever because they couldn't imagine anything else. Not a business arrangement to avoid danger, not a performance for appearances. She glanced at GIBM and found him already looking at her. For a moment their eyes held, and something passed between them that Cora couldn't quite name. The reception after was loud and cheerful, people loosened up by alcohol and celebration. GIBM danced with her once, stiff and formal but trying, his hand warm on her waist. You're terrible at this, Cora said, but she was smiling. I'm aware. My mother despaired of ever teaching me properly. Your mother? His expression closed off slightly. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, Cora said softly. My dad died when I was 16. Heart attack, completely sudden. I know it's not the same, but I understand missing someone. GIBM's hand tightened on her waist, pulling her fractionally closer. They swayed in silence for the rest of the song, and when it ended neither of them moved immediately. Thank you, he said quietly, for sharing that. Later, after they'd said their goodbyes and were heading back to the car, GIBM's phone rang. His expression went cold as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When, he demanded. How many? A pause. No, keep them there. I'm on my way. What's wrong? Cora asked as he hung up. Problem at one of my warehouses. I need to handle it personally. He looked at her, clearly torn. I should take you home first. Is it dangerous? Shouldn't be, just complicated. Then I'll come with you, Cora said before she could overthink it. If we're supposed to be married, I should probably know more about what you actually do, right? GIBM studied her face for a long moment. You might not like what you see. Maybe not, but I'd rather know the truth than live in ignorance. He nodded slowly. All right. But you stay in the car unless I say otherwise. Understood. The warehouse was in an industrial area near the port, surrounded by similar buildings that all looked abandoned. But when they pulled up, Cora could see lights on inside, and several cars parked around back. GIBM's security people were waiting at the entrance, their expressions grim. He spoke to them in rapid Korean, too fast for Cora to follow completely, but she caught words like shipment and missing and tracking. Someone's been stealing from us, GIBM explained, turning back to her. Small amounts at first, but it's been getting bolder. Tonight we caught them in the act. Are you going to call the police? His expression was wry. The police don't handle matters like this in my world. We take care of our own problems. What does that mean? Cora asked, suddenly nervous. You said you didn't do violence. I don't. Not unless absolutely necessary. But I need to make it clear that stealing from me has consequences. He touched her cheek briefly, an unexpected gesture of reassurance. Stay here. This won't take long. Cora watched through the car window as GIBM disappeared into the warehouse, several of his people following. The minutes ticked by slowly, her imagination conjuring up increasingly awful scenarios. Then she heard shouting, loud and angry, followed by the sound of something heavy falling. Her heart jumped into her throat. Against GIBM's explicit instructions, Cora got out of the car and moved toward the warehouse entrance. One of the security people tried to stop her, but she ducked around him, following the sound of voices to a large open space filled with shipping containers. GIBM stood in the center of the room, facing down a man who looked terrified. But there was no violence, no weapons drawn. Just GIBM talking in a low, intense voice that somehow carried more menace than any threat could have. "You're going to return everything you took," he was saying. "Every single item, documented and verified. And then you're going to tell me who you're working with, who put you up to this." "I can't," the man stammered. "They'll kill me." "And you think I won't?" GIBM's voice was ice. "The difference is, if you cooperate with me, you walk out of here alive and with a chance to disappear. If you don't, well, I have a reputation to maintain." The implication hung in the air, and Cora felt cold despite the warehouse's stuffy heat. This was the other side of GIBM, the dangerous one she'd heard about but never actually witnessed. "I'll talk," the man said finally, collapsing to his knees. "I'll tell you everything. Just please." "Good choice," GIBM said, his tone warming slightly. He gestured to his people. "Get him somewhere comfortable and record everything he says. And someone find out if his family needs protection. If he's in danger from his employers, they probably are too." That last part surprised Cora. He was protecting the thief's family? GIBM turned and spotted her standing near the entrance, his eyes widening slightly. He walked over quickly, taking her arm and steering her back toward the car. "I thought I told you to stay put," he said, but he didn't sound angry, just concerned. "I heard a crash and got worried," Cora admitted. "I thought maybe that I was hurting someone," GIBM finished. "I told you I don't do violence unless necessary. Fear and consequences are much more effective tools." He opened the car door for her. "Are you all right?" "I know that was probably uncomfortable to see." "You're protecting his family," Cora said instead of answering. "The guy who stole from you, you're making sure his family stays safe." "Of course. They're innocent in this, and whoever hired him might try to silence them to keep him quiet." GIBM slid into the car beside her. "Just because someone wronged me doesn't mean I want their children to suffer." Cora looked at him, really looked at him, seeing both sides of this complicated man. The dangerous businessman who commanded fear and respect, and the father who made breakfast with his son, who protected innocent families, who'd smiled more since she came into his life. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "Good or bad?" "Good," Cora said and meant it. "Definitely good." Something shifted in GIBM's expression, his usual control slipping for just a moment. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're not what I expected either," he murmured. "I thought this would stay simple, just a business arrangement. But you—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle with words. "You make things complicated, Cora Bebe." "Sorry," she whispered. "Not sorry at all." "Don't be." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I'm starting to think complicated might be exactly what I needed." They sat there in the back of the car, the warehouse lights casting strange shadows through the windows, the world outside fading away until it was just the two of them and this moment that felt fragile and important. GIBM leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Cora didn't want to pull away, didn't want to be sensible or remember that this was supposed to be pretend. So when his forehead touched hers, when his breath mingled with hers, she closed the final distance between them. The contact was gentle, tentative, nothing like the dramatic scenes in movies. Just two people finding their way to each other, figuring out if this thing between them could be real. When they separated, GIBM's eyes were dark and uncertain. "That wasn't part of our arrangement." "No," Cora agreed. "It wasn't. Do you want it to be?" She thought about the past month, about breakfast with Dae-young and charity dinners and afternoons at the park. Thought about the way her heart sped up when GIBM smiled, the way she looked forward to seeing him, The way this pretend marriage had started feeling real without her noticing. "Yeah," she said. "I think maybe I do." GIBM's expression transformed, uncertainty giving way to something warm and real. "Good. Because I've been trying to figure out how to ask if we could make this more than an arrangement without sounding completely ridiculous." "You ridiculous?" "Never." Cora teased, then sobered. "But we should probably figure out what this means. Exactly. Like, are we actually trying to build something here, or—" "I want to try," GIBM said firmly. "If you're willing. No more pretending, no more just for appearances. I want us to be real." "Okay," Cora said, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Let's be real then." They told Dae-young the next day over breakfast, though honestly, he didn't seem surprised at all. "I knew it," he crowed, pointing his spoon at them triumphantly. "I knew you liked each other for real. Juno at school said you were just pretending, but I said no way, my appa doesn't smile like that for pretending." "You're too smart for your own good," GIBM said, ruffling his son's hair fondly. "Does this mean Cora-ama is staying forever now?" Dae-young asked, suddenly serious. "Like, actually forever, not just pretend forever?" Cora looked at GIBM, who looked back at her, and something unspoken passed between them. "Yeah," Cora said, reaching across the table to take Dae-young's small hand. "Actually forever. If that's okay with you?" "Yes," Dae-young shouted, launching himself out of his chair to hug them both. "This is the best day ever." Things shifted after that conversation, subtle but significant. GIBM started calling her just to talk, not because there was an event to attend or appearance to maintain. He'd show up at her apartment with takeout, and they'd eat together while watching terrible television, arguing good-naturedly about plot holes and character decisions. One evening about 2 weeks later, Cora was cooking dinner in her apartment when someone knocked. She opened the door to find GIBM holding an enormous bouquet of flowers, looking simultaneously confident and uncertain. "What's this for?" she asked, accepting the flowers with a surprised laugh. "Do I need a reason to bring my wife flowers?" GIBM countered, but his ears were turning pink. "Your real wife, you mean," Cora corrected, breathing in the sweet scent of roses and lilies. "These are beautiful. Come in. I'm making doro what? It's an Ethiopian stew. You'll probably hate it because it's really spicy, but—" "I want to try it," GIBM interrupted. "I want to know everything about you, Cora. Your food, your culture, your favorite things, the stories from before you came to Seoul. All of it." So while the stew simmered, Cora told him about growing up in Addis Ababa, about her mother who sold coffee at the market, and her younger sister who wanted to be a doctor. She told him about leaving after her father died, needing space from grief and memories, choosing Seoul almost at random, because a friend had moved there first. "Do you miss it?" GIBM asked. "Home. Sometimes," Cora admitted. "Mostly I miss my family, but we video call every week. My mom thinks I'm crazy for marrying someone I barely knew, but she also says you must be special if I chose you. Am I special?" Cora looked at him, at this man who'd somehow become so important to her in such a short time. "Yeah, you really are." They ate dinner together, GIBM gamely trying the spicy stew even though it made his eyes water. He kept eating anyway, stubborn and determined, until Cora took pity on him and brought out yogurt to cool the burn. "That was intense," he said, gasping slightly. "Also delicious. I think my mouth might be permanently on fire, but it was worth it." "Lightweight," Cora teased. "Dae-young would probably handle it better than you. Dae-young eats ice cream for breakfast when I'm not looking. His spice tolerance is not to be trusted." GIBM smiled, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I know I'm not always good at emotional things, at saying what I mean, but I'm trying." "I know you are," Cora said, squeezing his fingers. "And honestly, you're doing better than you think." They'd started going on actual dates after that, real ones where the goal was just to spend time together and enjoy each other's company. GIBM took her to a traditional tea house where they sat on floor cushions and sampled different varieties while an elderly woman explained the history of each blend. He took her to a bookstore that stayed open until midnight, where they browsed separate sections and then showed each other their favorites. Cora introduced him to Ethiopian restaurants he'd never tried, taught him basic Amharic phrases that he practiced with endearing determination. She dragged him to a Noribang room despite his protests that he couldn't sing, then proceeded to duet with him on increasingly ridiculous songs until they were both laughing too hard to continue. "I can't believe you made me sing that," Gibm said afterward, still grinning. "My reputation would be completely destroyed if anyone heard." "Your reputation as a scary businessman?" Cora countered. "Pretty sure that's already compromised by the fact that you let Dae-young paint your toenails last week." He was very insistent about the design, Gibm said with dignity. "And it's not my fault he chose glitter polish." They were walking through Namsan Park, no security detail in sight for once because Gibm had declared they deserved a few hours of normalcy. The weather had finally turned warm, spring pushing away the last remnants of winter. "Can I ask you something?" Cora said after a while. "About Dae-young's mom?" Gibm's expression went careful. "What do you want to know?" "Did you love her?" "Yes," he said simply. "Not the way movies show it, not the dramatic, overwhelming thing. But yes, I loved her. We grew up together, our families arranged the marriage, and we made it work. She was kind and patient, and a wonderful mother." He paused. "But I'm not going to lie and say she was the love of my life, that there could never be anyone else. That wouldn't be fair to her memory or to you. So, there could be someone else?" Cora asked quietly. Gibm stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Cora, you are someone else. You're not a replacement or a second choice. You're the person who makes me want to be better, who makes me laugh, who my son adores, and who somehow saw past everything I show the world to what's underneath. So yes, there could be someone else. There is someone else. It's you." Cora felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind that came from being seen and valued and chosen. That was possibly the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Good, because I was worried it sounded too rehearsed. I might have practiced in the car on the way here. That made her laugh through her tears, and then Gibm was wiping them away gently, his touch reverent. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words coming out rushed like he'd been holding them back. "I know it's fast, I know we started all wrong, but I can't help it. Every day I fall a little more, and I needed you to know." "I'm falling too," Cora whispered. "Have been for weeks, probably. Maybe since you brought me flowers, or maybe since I saw you with Dae-young at the park, or maybe since that very first day, when you looked at your son like he was your whole world." They stood there in the middle of the path, foreheads touching, the world moving around them, but none of it mattering. Just this moment, this connection, this feeling of finding something unexpected and precious. "Take me home?" Cora said eventually. "Not to my apartment. Home." Gibm understood immediately. "You mean?" "I mean your house, with Dae-young and the ridiculous kitchen and the drawings on the fridge. That home. I'm tired of pretending we live separately when we both know where I actually want to be." His smile was bright enough to rival the sun. "Let's go home then." Moving her things into Gibm's house took less time than expected because Cora didn't actually own that much. Dae-young helped enthusiastically, carrying boxes that were probably too heavy for him but refusing any suggestion that he slow down. "This is your room," he announced, showing her the space Gibm had prepared. "But also Appa's room is right there so you can be together. I asked if I could have the room between you, but Appa said something about privacy and grown-up things that I didn't really understand, but whatever." "This is perfect," Cora said, looking around at the beautiful space with its big windows and comfortable furniture. "Thank you for helping me move in." "You're family now," Dae-young said matter-of-factly. "Real family, not just paper family. That means we help each other." That night, after Dae-young was asleep and the house was quiet, Cora found Gibm in his office reviewing paperwork. He looked up when she entered, immediately setting aside his work. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to," Cora corrected, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Wanted to see you instead." They talked for hours about nothing and everything, the conversation flowing easily in a way that felt completely natural. Gibm told her about the legitimate businesses he was trying to expand, his hope that Dae-young could inherit something clean and legal instead of the complicated empire his own father had left him. Cora told him about her dream of maybe opening her own restaurant someday, serving the food of her childhood to people who'd never tasted it before. "We could make that happen," GIBM said. "I have contacts, resources, experience with restaurants. If that's what you want, Cora, I'll help you build it."
"Not yet," she said.
"Maybe someday, but right now I'm happy where I am. With you and Dae-young building this life we stumbled into." "Best stumble I ever made," GIBM murmured. The weeks turned into months, and their life together developed a comfortable rhythm. Breakfast with Dae-young before school, GIBM heading to his office, while Cora worked at one of his restaurants, where she'd taken a management position. Evenings together as a family, homework help and dinner, and stories before bed. But there were also moments just for the two of them, stolen afternoons and quiet evenings when Dae-young was with his tutor or at a friend's house. Times when they could just be GIBM and Cora, not parents or partners or people with responsibilities, just themselves. One Saturday, GIBM surprised her with a trip to the coast, just the two of them for the whole weekend. They stayed in a small guest house overlooking the ocean, spent their days walking along the beach, and their evenings talking until late into the night. "I want to renew our vows," GIBM said on their last evening there, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "The real way this time, with family and friends, and all the traditional elements. I want to marry you again, Cora, but for the right reasons." "We're already married," Cora pointed out, but she was smiling. "We're legally married. I want to be married in every other way too, emotionally, spiritually, publicly. I want everyone to know that I chose you, and you chose me, that this isn't some business arrangement, but something real and lasting." "Then let's do it," Cora said. "Let's have the wedding we should have had from the beginning." The ceremony took place 3 months later in the gardens behind GIBM's house, under cherry blossom trees that scattered pink petals like snow. Cora's mother and sister flew in from Ethiopia, along with a handful of her friends from the restaurant. GIBM's people were there too, the ones who'd become more than employees over the years, plus Dae-young serving proudly as ring bearer. This time there were flowers and music and vows they'd written themselves. This time when GIBM slipped the ring on her finger, his hands were shaking slightly with emotion instead of steady with business efficiency. This time when they faced each other and promised forever, they both knew exactly what that meant. "I promise to be your partner," GIBM said, his voice carrying across the quiet garden. "To protect you and support you and laugh with you. To be honest even when it's hard. To choose you every day. To build a life with you that's full of joy and love and probably a lot of chaos thanks to our son. I promise to never take for granted the miracle of you walking into my life on the worst night and making everything better." Cora was crying by the time he finished, happy tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "I promise to be your safe place," she said. "The person you can be yourself with. No masks or performances required. I promise to love Dae-young like my own, to build a home with you that's full of warmth and laughter. I promise to stay even when things get complicated, to choose you back every single day, to never forget how lucky I am that you needed someone to shelter your son in a snowstorm." When they were pronounced married for the second time, the applause was loud and genuine. Dae-young cheered the loudest, jumping up and down with excitement. The reception afterward was joyful and chaotic in the best way. Cora's mother danced with GIBM's business partners, her sister bonded with Dae-young over video games, and somewhere along the way the formal event turned into a genuine celebration of family and love and new beginnings. "Happy?" GIBM asked, pulling Cora close as they swayed to music in the garden. "Incredibly," she said. "Who knew that saving a kid in a snowstorm would lead to all this?" "I did." Dae-young piped up from where he was supposed to be sitting at his table. "I totally knew. I'm basically the reason you're together, so you're welcome." "Thank you, Dae-young," they said in unison, trying not to laugh. "You're welcome. Can I have more cake now?" "Absolutely not," GIBM said, but he was grinning. "Go dance with your grandmother instead." They watched their son scamper off to find Cora's mother, who welcomed him with open arms and a laugh. "This is good," Cora said softly. "This life we built from nothing, this family we made. It's really good, GIBM." "It's perfect," he corrected, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're perfect. We're perfect. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret sheltering a lost child in that snowstorm. I could never regret that, Cora whispered. It brought me to you, brought me to all of this. Best decision I ever made. As the sun set on their second wedding day, their first real one, Cora looked around at the people gathered in celebration and felt overwhelming gratitude. For the storm that had brought Dae-young into her path, for the father who'd claimed her as his bride and then somehow became so much more, for the love that had grown between them despite every odds stacked against it. She'd come to Seoul 3 years ago looking for a fresh start, running from grief and memories. Instead, she'd found a home, a family, and a love that felt like destiny. Not bad for someone who'd just been trying to keep a kid from freezing to death. Can't believe we made it through this entire love story together. Feels like we went on the journey right alongside them. Tell me in the comments which character you connected with most, Cora's kindness or GIBM's growth throughout the story. If you're hungry for more romance that hits different, subscribe and I'll keep bringing you these stories. Loved sharing it. Maybe hit that like button and let me know what you thought in the comments. I'd really love to hear from you.